be back doing these author interviews. I took about a month and a half hiatus from since my last one with David Hyam Smith. And a lot of the authors I've been in touch with have been very patient with me on rescheduling things. And today we are joined by Cath Thompson. She is an artist and an occultist. And I, for one, think she has a beautifully creative soul, which adds something unique to the occult community. Cath is author of a handful of books that can be found on Amazon, including A Handbook of Stellar Magic, The 21st Century Pentagram Ritual, Finding New Symbols, House 418, The Circle Squared, and the book which will be the topic of most of today's discussion, The Magical Language of the Book of the Law, an English Qaballa primer, right there. So Cath, thank you so much for joining us today. It's good to be with you.
Thank you for inviting me, Eric.
And what is the date today? What are we on? Like the
24th.
Yep, July 24th, 2021.
Yes.
Well, first off, down close to home, back to basics. How have you fared so far this year? Things have been crazy all over the world.
Yes, I think I've fared quite well, all things considered. I'm in good health and I'm in comfortable circumstances, and
oh, that's good.
That's good enough.
Are you given the benefit of you strike me as a little bit of a hermit type, kind of keeping to yourself, doing your own thing?
Hermit. I am a total hermit. Yes.
Yeah.
I am indeed.
Well, first off, to give the viewers a little bit of just a background history on your work and your unique contribution to the magical and esoteric community, how did you stumble across, I guess you could say, thelema, or just occultism in general? How is it that you found yourself on the path of championing English Qaballa?
Right. Well, I met somebody who happened to be a member of the group that was led by James Legis, who discovered the key to the English Qaballa. And
around about what year was that? Was this back in the 70s?
No, this was 1980.
1980, okay.
Mm-hmm. And at his house, he had the group copy of the Book of the Law, which was a photocopy of the typed manuscript with all the numbers added up and typed in underneath, all the words and all the phrases totaled up and all the verses totaled up and all these numbers scattered throughout the text and bound up in a sort of stapled and cardboard cover thing.
And this gets me thinking about the the access to occult information back during that time and the way that these things would circulate. We certainly take for granted with the internet now that everything has become so easily accessible.
Very much so, yeah.
For instance, around that time in the 1980s, could you even easily find a copy of, say, 777 by Crowley in a bookstore?
If you went to the right bookstore, yes. There were a small number of well-established occult bookshops, magical occult shops in the UK. There's a number in London and some up north and in other cities, one or two. And there are all sorts of people running little groups and publishing little magazines and bigger magazines, 250 editions once a year or something, or 4 times a year if you were lucky. And there was a lot going on, and in lots of separate communities, and people would generally meet up at other people's houses, and they'd meet up at these occult bookshops. And so it was a sort of a swirling round. And Jim's group was in the Midlands, so he knew various people who were of reputation in their day. And they knew other people who were of reputation. Alex Sanders, there's a name. He came along shortly.
Not familiar with Alex Sanders in the British occult scene.
You're not familiar with Alex Sanders?
Never heard the name.
He was a tolerably well-known witch.
Okay.
But this is before my time, so you know. But people did know each other, and people would travel to meet each other, and people would write to each other. You know, if people would take pen and paper and write a letter. And 9 times out of 10, the person they wrote to would respond. And, you know, it sort of went on like that.
Yeah. And so I come from a totally different, you know, occult lineage or school of thought, I guess, than you do. I was with a Paul Foster Case lineage for about 5 years. And it was interesting to, you know, to be able to read some of those, you know, those handwritten dialogues that Paul Foster Case would have with Dion Fortune over in England, and then with Arthur Edward Waite at the time. And at a certain point, some of those messages back and forth through the mail between them were always speculating about Crowley and what went wrong with Crowley's initiation and the Golden Dawn and all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
People were still asking those questions. The people who came after Dion Fortune, you know, and the next generation of occultists and magicians was still wondering.
Yeah.
What was that?
You know, and knowing that you and I were going to be finally doing our interview today, oddly enough, when I slept last night, I was dreaming about Crowley, and you certainly have to acknowledge that whatever that was Crowley, he made his mark upon the zeitgeist of the 20th century, and no one can undo that, whatever it was.
He received the new holy book. He announced the dawn of the new aeon. It's here. It's real. I know it's not supposed to be. I mean, nobody wants to live in a time of miracles. Not really. But
may you live in interesting times, as the old Chinese curse. We certainly are living in those times.
Curse, exactly so.
Yeah.
Well, there it is. I mean, who can deny the extraordinary revolution that's occurred since 1904?
Yeah.
No, just within the first 10 years. Incredible changes.
Yeah. So backtracking a bit here. Okay. So you linked up with James Lees. You said back in '84, and that was kind of your introduction to. Probably not your first brushing with the occult scene, because like you said, these people would find each other out and talk at bookstores and exchange messages. But so he became a bit of a mentor or a guide, so to speak.
Well, I was initiated into that group.
Was that Golden Dawn or Astrum Argentium, or was it simply sort of an isolated research group?
It was an independent, isolated research group. It called itself the OAA, Ordo Argentum Astrum, but it that was a name that it gave itself. It was nothing to do with anybody else. And the initiation ritual, I suppose, was basically a Golden Dawn man of Earth, held outside in a woodland, all stuff. Yeah. So I became a member of the group and began to learn as the rest of the group was learning about EQ. They were only 4 years into studying it. So I only had 4 years work to catch up there. And learning about Hebrew Qaballa as well, and learning about astrology as well, and learning all three more or less at the same time.
Out of curiosity, when you were beginning your studies with all of that, did you have any preferences towards certain occult sciences? And did you have any lack of interest entirely in others when you first started?
I was never very interested in conjuring demons. I always leaned more towards the mystical side of magic than the sort of ceremonial ritual grimoire sort of style. Yeah.
I'm the same way. In my thinking, so when I was going through, my basic studies when I entered occultism and working through the lower grades of the tree and the Golden Dawn system, I found myself having strong reservations against demonology and Solomonic magic and all of that kind of stuff also. And when I was questioning it, I suppose my rationale was that if you take the schemata of the tree of life as a given for a template of reality, and you notice that the tree of life is cyclical, that everything that comes through from Kether, pouring through the influences down to Malkuth, and then all of the evolution of Malkuthian interactions rising back up the tree, you notice a cyclic sort of regenerative quality to it, So the whole concept of, let's say, 500, 600, or 700 years ago, some occultist who seems to have mapped out all of these intelligences of the Qlipothic or underworld demons. Well, what if 500 years later or 700 years later, they're not demons anymore? What if they've changed? What if they've evolved? What if they've moved back up into, the sphere of a rectified tree? Did you ever give any thought to that? Or?
No, I didn't. I never went that far into Hebrew Qaballa. I was, my primary focus was the English Qaballa. Always.
Yeah. So and let's switch over into some talk about the Hebrew Qaballa. So for the viewers at home, just to give a quick background on how me and Cath connected here. It was recent. I want to say like 2 months ago, maybe.
About that.
Yeah. I just decided to start doing these podcasts, and on Facebook, I was scrolling down the news feed, and we all passed by that little string that says recommended, connections, and most of us passed by that. And something about your name, actually. Your name is what caught my eye, Cath, Cath. And I was scrolling by and it was like Cath Thompson. And I stopped. I thought, Cath, that's a weird name. And I clicked on your profile and right there it said English Kabbalist. And I thought, oh my God, I have to have a conversation with this woman. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, yes. And here we are. And I listened to your last podcast, or I watched your last podcast with the Hebrew Kabbalist. I thought it was wonderful.
He is such a rich and inspiring soul. He is. Yeah.
But that's not the system that I'm working myself.
Yes. And as you and I have talked a little bit about in our private discussions, my work with the Paul Foster case system from the very beginning and all throughout the intermediaries and even towards my leaving, that fraternity, all along was this need and this impetus to reinvent the Kabbalah. So of course that's something you try to brush off as the impetuousness of youth, perhaps. Everyone who comes in wants to reinvent it. It's like all that. But there was something specific about the English language being this sort of, I suppose, overlooked, or like even the concept of English language, or I'm sorry, English Kabbalah in a traditional Hermetic system, it's always kicked to the curb and ignored and bastard. It's like this. There's an assumption that it's this bastardized system because Hebrew was divinely received as a language, and so was Greek, and so was Latin, and yet we're told that English just happened to develop, and it wasn't divine, and there was no divine sort of manifest destiny behind it and all that.
I know you can only do gematria in the old ways. There is no new way to do gematria. It doesn't matter that we're in the 21st century. It doesn't matter that we're poised on the brink of planetary destruction. None of these new era phenomena matter at all. You cannot do gematria any other way. But there is a new way to do gematria. There is.
Yeah.
It's just an alternative for the modern world.
That's right. Let's talk about that a bit. Let me show a quick screenshot from the book here. Hopefully the viewers at home can see that. And I'll just hold it there for a sec. I know it's a little hard to see, but I'll post links to Cath Thompson's work in the description notes of this episode. But there's the system. There's the gematria system for English. And I couldn't help but notice you auspiciously put that on the 11th page of the book. Perhaps that's a good place to start. Well, why'd you put that on the 11th page?
And you have to thank my publisher for that. The wonderful Elizabeth Barthold, Elizabeth Carr, Hadean Press. I bow before my publisher.
Hopefully that's out of honest admiration and not
I can speak
not
no praise high enough to my publisher. So no, she did that, not me.
Yeah. And I do have right in front of me here from Crowley's Thoth deck, the 11th card of the tarot, which people can make of this whatever they want, that he happened to insert the prime specific key to his English Qabbalah system in the 11th card of the tarot, which also happens to be his solar sign of Libra. Justice.
Yes.
So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on that there, and hopefully you can see in the scales what Crowley did with his 11th major arcana, Justice. I don't know if that's coming out, but on the one scale it's the side for Libra, and on the other is the letter A.
Yes.
And that is the key symbol alluding to the gematria system for English.
Yes, I saw that all right, so I expect everybody else did.
Good. So let's go from there. So you started working with James Lees, and as you said, was he a bit of a solo renegade researcher, unpacking the whole English Qabbalah of the Book of the Law?
He would like that description. a solo renegade researcher. I think he'd approve of that. Yeah, he was a magician, an astrologer. He'd studied Hebrew Qaballa and done alchemy and worked the Abramelin system. He'd done all the stuff, and he formed this little group to just to see what it was like to have a group and do rituals with other people, I think, to begin with. And then And then he went off on a magical retirement in 1976. And in November 76, he thought, well, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I'm going to have a look at the Book of the Law and see if I can find anything that looks like a order and value of the English alphabet. And some of the members of the group came round and they all started adding up letters and numbers. You know that sequence of letters in chapter 2, verse 76?
I don't. I don't.
No.
I read through the Book of the Law once. I read through it once. I didn't study it. And I want to say it was about 3, 4 years ago, simply because I was curious. But coming from the Paul Foster case system, all of our work strictly suggested that we stay as far away from anything Crowley as possible. So that was where I was coming from and approaching it.
Yeah. No, I'm sure a lot of people shared that point of view. This chapter 2, verse 76 is a string of numbers and letters that makes no sense at all. There are 28 of them. And so it's one of the places to start looking for a key to the mystery, because this bit particularly makes no sense. So they're messing about with this and they come up with the same number on 3 different calculators. 286, which Jim spots is the sum of 22 times 13 and also 26 times 11.
So we have right there a reference to the number of Hebrew letters and the number of English letters.
Exactly. And you have this interesting number 11. So you count 11 letters on from A when you get to L. And you count 11 letters on from L and you get to W. And this is what Jim saw and this is what Jim did. And he found this ALWH as demonstrated on that 26-point star. And they found that it makes this universal star, which was, a good sign, really, that it works. And then they found it again on the grid in the manuscript, Crowley's original manuscript of the Book of the Law, the 3rd day's writing. There's a grid on the page of the 16th page of the notebook that he was writing in. And it looks like a code square. And sure enough, if you fill it in correctly, you get ALW along the diagonal line on that very page. I can show you that if you want.
Yeah. I wonder, so is because I know in Crowley's book 777, he took most of that, from previous work that was already acquired by S.L. McGregor Mathers and other, Golden Dawn people, and kind of put his own name on it. And there was one position of it that Crowley just stole the knowledge, from the Golden Dawn, but there was another position on it that he was adding things to it as well in certain areas. So I kind of wonder, because I haven't researched much of Crowley. I've read a few of his books. I love Lon Milo DeQuette's primer on the Thoth Tarot. I think that's one of the best introductory books on tarot in general out there, regardless of what deck you're using. That's a great, great book. But as far as I know, Crowley never really put to text a decisive or a concise primer for English gematria explicitly. Did he, or did he just riddle all these clues everywhere?
He never found it.
He was still searching for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's page in the manuscript.
Hold that there for a moment, please. Okay, what are we looking at?
We're looking at a page in the manuscript which says, this line drawn is a key. And that diagonal line is part of the original manuscript.
And that was Crowley's handwritten notes on Liber Albel Legis, the Book of the Law?
That is his manuscript of it.
Huh.
Okay, that's his handwritten manuscript. And if you fill that grid in, that's what you get. You get ALWHSDOZ, KVG, RCN along the diagonal line.
The pattern isn't intuitive at first glance.
No, it's got nothing to do with intuition. It's a very, very simple code square. It would be useless as a covert code square because it's got all the vowels along the top line. You'd never use it if you were a spy trying to code up a signal.
Ah.
But it does give you the order and value of the English alphabet. And nobody really can explain why that grid's there in the manuscript. But there it is. It's just an added confirmation that the English Qaballa really is a new method of gematria, confirming or suggesting or proposing the English language as a magical language as it was spoken and used in 1904.
So I remember when I read through the Book of the Law, my main impression, of course, which is probably common for most people, was just being taken aback by the horrific nature of so much of the text of what's being written. It's just so awful and amoral, and yet it'll bounce back and forth between these beautifully poetic sort of devotional admonitions to the goodness of all being.
Yeah.
And then it'll jump into this horrible, tyrannical, sort of ruthless type proclamations. And yet I remember when I did read through it, that one line, I didn't memorize it, of course, but he makes a reference to a call, a demand upon the people of the future, a need for the development of new symbol sets and deciphering English gematria.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, that call is something that I feel, because I really feel like so many of the old systems, so many of the old traditions, they've handed us this vast inheritance that's been safeguarded throughout the ages in the time capsules that were the esoteric fraternities, preserving and safeguarding this wisdom.
Yeah.
And, it seems to have reached a pinnacle during the Industrial Revolution with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, when they're trying to take everything they can and blend it together into a system. And then that produced a small handful of initiates that went off and founded schools, Crowley being one of them. And the work is still ongoing, basically, was that beautiful inference that Crowley referenced with the call to decipher and develop, an English gematria system. And there's not many people working with that English gematria system. Off the top of your head, where would you like to see maybe some of the work with that system moving into regarding the magical community? What are the applications there?
You can apply English Qaballa into any system that's got any expression in English. So if you're working with the Greek papyrus grimoire magic, you can write out the demonic names with your English letters, and you can calculate the values. And I mean, that's very basic. That's very, very basic. So basic, probably nobody bothers to do that, but there are heaps of other things you can do. just with regard to grimoire magic, and that is not my area of expertise. That's Jake's work largely covers that area of the exploration of English Qaballa, or sets enough of a signpost in that direction for other people to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be good if more people pressed along that road that Jake opened up. I'm sure Jake wouldn't mind. And from my point of view, it would be, I'd just like to see more occultists learn astrology.
Oh, that is so interesting for you to say that. That is
I
something I
agree.
have pushed among my occult fellows as well. And it's so interesting you say that, because when I came into the Fraternitas LVX Occulta, which was an offshoot of Boda, the Paul Foster case thing, I had zero interest in astrology. And I even had zero interest in Kabbalah. I just thought Kabbalah was Hebrew mysticism, and I wasn't. I mean, I was the son of a Southern Baptist pastor, so I was familiar with the Bible, but I had kind of long since turned my back on the church, so to speak. And I thought, Hebrew mysticism, no, I'm not interested in that. I want to learn psychic phenomena and alchemy and all this kind of stuff. Well, sure enough, as I was learning all the rudiments of all the different Western occult systems, it just so happened that my mentor for the first 2 years was the author of the higher astrological work in the fraternity. And he made a living as a Renaissance astrology talisman caster.
Mm.
And astrology was his thing. So he was always pushing astrology. And it wasn't until I learned astrology that I realized its import, not only on tarot, but also on alchemy. For instance, people who have an interest in tarot, but they're not educated in astrology, they're missing like 30-40% of what tarot is. There's so much of it that's astrological. And then even in the Masonic grade work initiations, I've seen a lot of astrology in the symbolism of why they're doing what they're doing. But you could be surrounded, by Freemason buddies who aren't occultists. They're just Freemasons, perhaps for their own reasons, and all of that's going right over their head. But the astrology is there. The astrology is key.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
There shouldn't really be the separation that there is between astrology and the rest of occultism. It seems to have happened when Copernicus did his thing, and the whole astrological brotherhood, if I can call it that. Not to suggest that it was anything like a brotherhood, but the sort of the people who were practicing astrology at the time had to decide which measurement of the sky they were going to go with, the heliocentric or the geocentric. And this seems to have caused a split between occultists and astrologers. And occultists seem to have chugged along quite happily into Rosicrucianism and Golden Dawn and all these other varieties of occult practice. I'm being very careful with what I say.
Why is that?
And the astrologers have kind of gone off in another direction and kind of vanished, rather. Well, they're back again now on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But for a long time, astrology was a completely different, separate subject.
Yeah.
Jim was fortunate as a young man to meet an astrologer who did his chart for him and predicted his future for him with such degree of accuracy that Jim thought, I've got to learn this. And so he did. And from there, he discovered the Key of Solomon, and the notion of planetary spirits. And from there, he began to be an occultist as well as an astrologer. But for a while, he made a living as an astrologer. No, doing astrology for clients. And but the bloke he met was a tramp.
A Trump?
A gentleman of the road. Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant related to the former president of America.
Oh no. Tramp.
Oh, I see. Okay.
No, nothing to do with any such anything. No.
Oh, so
Vagrant, you call them in America.
oh, vagrant. Oh, okay. I see. Yeah.
Homeless person. Yeah. But he was a professional homeless person.
And who was this?
Just somebody Jim knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, many decades ago. Many decades ago. Who introduced him to astrology in the first place?
I remember reading about a fellow named Grady McCurtry, who was quite revered in the Thalamic Society. I forget exactly what his lineage was, but he was one of the earlier, like 1960s initiates into Crowley's Golden Dawn and Crowley's Astrum Argenteum. Around the time that oh golly, the first books on the Golden Dawn were finally being published by Ray Gardy and all that. And there's a weird thing about Grady McCurtry is that he lived like a vagabond. He was homeless by choice.
It wasn't Grady McMurtry, though.
Am I getting confused? Who am I thinking of?
I don't really know who you're thinking of. Grady McMurtry was a high-ranking OTO member. One of Crowley's immediate descendants. As far as I know, he had a go at suing Jim for copyright of Liber.
Are you serious?
Yeah, when Jim published English Qaballa. Yeah.
Oh gosh, copyright of Liber.
How can you copyright a holy book? You either have to agree it's a holy book.
Well,
Amorc
copyrighted the term Rosicrucian. I'm sure you're aware of that. They started suing other schools that were using the name. So going back to astrology here, there was one paragraph that really stuck out at me in your book here. And it's on page 33, an important number to Freemasons. So I'll just read the paragraph here, and it's referencing astrology in terms of the English gematria system. Okay, so it says, counting well, in quotation, counting well, is another method derived from the third chapter of the Book of Law, involving two words. The value of the first word is multiplied by the number of letters in the second word, and the value of the second word multiplied by the number of letters in the first, and the two totals then added together. The word Jesus equals 68. Christ equals 81. And so the calculation is as follows. 68 times 6 equals 408, and 81 times 5 equals 405. The subtotals giving the sum 408 plus 405 equals 813. This is the precise sum total of all the planets by English Qaballa calculation, which shows that the planetary influences are harmonized by the power of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
That's pretty profound. And for the viewers who aren't familiar with gematria, this paragraph that I just read, it's really alluding to almost a profound Kabbalistic insight that's on par with the import of the old Hebrew Kabbalah systems. One of when it comes gematria, number, alphabet, alliteration. It's only one aspect of Kabbalah, of course, but the most famous and popular example of profound insight being extracted from gematria in Hebrew Kabbalah is the relationship between the serpent in the Garden of Eden and Jesus. And the Hebrew word used in the book of Genesis, for the serpent who deceived Eve to eat the apple was I believe it was like mahash or nehash, something like that. I forget the pronunciation. But it has the numeric value of 358, which just so happens to be the same numeric value of the word for Messiah, which is Meshiach, 358. And the only reason that's significant is that in the entirety of the whole Bible, the only two words in the entire Bible that equal 358 are the serpent in the Garden of Eden and Jesus, the Christ. So
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and
it is. Beautiful.
It is. And what you're pointing to here in the New English system is a direct correlation between the words Jesus Christ and the entirety of all of the planets astrologically.
Yes.
How who noted that? Was that you, or was that Jim who found that?
I don't know. That was already that was already there when I came along as one of the best proofs of the veracity of the system, which was that was a major target in those days, was finding correspondences that proved that the system was what we all thought it was. The verse in the book of the law that you were referring to earlier, thou shalt discover the order and value of the English alphabet, thou shalt obtain new symbols to attribute them unto.
Yes, that's it. And see, me being a properly brainwashed Paul Foster Casian who was told that, to stay away from Crowley stuff. When I read that, I thought, okay, I'll ignore all this other crazy stuff he's talking about and just take that and run, because that's important. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what that's what we did. That's what English Qaballa is. English Qaballa is the order and value promised in the book of the law. And I know that there are other systems of English gematria using the English alphabet, giving different numeric values to the letters for various different reasons, and quite a few of them call themselves English Qaballa, but it's spelt differently.
And how do you spell English Qaballa, and why?
Qaballa.
Why the removal of the H?
In 1976, when Jim discovered the order and value, he christened it English Qaballa, and he knew at the time that was not a spelling of Qaballa that anybody else was using. So that's why he chose that spelling, because nobody else was using it.
That's a sure enough distinction. Yeah. And I've known a few Rosicrucians who always spell it with the C instead of the Q. You have the the K for the Hebrew, the Q for the Hermeticists, and the C for the Christians. Yeah. We all have to have our calling cards nowadays, don't we?
Yeah. Well, it's 1B, 2 L's for us lot.
1B, 2 L's.
Okay.
So let me gather my tarot cards here. I had a question. about something with English gematria related to tarot. Okay. All right.
Okay, can I finish off on 813 first?
Yes, please go ahead.
813 is the sum total of all the planets, and it's Jesus Christ counted well. If you subtract the value of the sun from 813, you get 777. Because sun in English Qaballa adds to 36.
Interesting.
Isn't that sweet?
Removal of the sun. You know, I was looking at a friend's astrology chart recently, and it was unlike any astrology chart I'd ever seen, because it was a Sagittarius sun, right? But the sun sign had no aspects at all to any other planets.
Oh, wow.
Just standing alone, right? And yet he had this giant stellium cluster of activity in Capricorn, which overshadowed the Sagittarian influence. And I remember that was just recently I was looking at that, and it got me contemplating the planetary influences of things, regardless of our sun sign. How do you interpret that numerology there of the removal of the sun being such a profound equivalent numerologically?
It's if you take the sun out of the system, you're taking away the symbol of the maleness, the masculine part of the scene, if you like, and so what you're left with is 777, which is the three faces of the goddess, which it's the rest of it is divine feminine.
Let's talk about that a bit. And removal of the sun, when we think about that in a tree of life context of the Kabbalistic tree of life, the rectified tree, so to speak, you know, because the tree of life is sort of disjointed and awkward looking. And there's that Lurianic Kabbalah, you know, notion of tikkun olam, the rectification of the world, where Malkuth down at the bottom, which is this offshoot, disjointed, you know, thing pulling the whole tree down. If that incorporates above Tifereth into Deoth, we now have a symmetrical, you know, cohesive tree of life.
Yes.
So that removal of something regarding Tifereth, which is the sun, you see, yeah, that removal of that, of placing the manifest bottom outcome of all the influences back up into the invisible sphere of Deoth, somehow rectifies the whole tree. Do you think that might be conceptually relational to the inference of the numbers there that you're working with?
I think that's a brilliant piece of analysis and synthesis that you've just done right there. Are you not familiar with the English Kabbalistic tree of life?
I'm not. No. Is there an English tree?
Yeah, there is. Oh dearie me, let's show it you. It's I've got an illustration of it in this book somewhere. Where is it? I'm not finding it. I'm not finding the one I'm looking for. Just hold on a minute.
Of course. In fact, while you're looking at that, I'll rant for a moment. Most of my friends who follow this podcast are occultists. However, as you know, gematria is a little bit of a more specialized niche in the toolkit, you know, of occultists. We have we have tarot, we have Kabbalah, we have astrology, we have sacred geometry, we have theurgy and ceremonial workings and all this kind of stuff, alchemy. Gematria is it's a it's a niche or niche. It's a niche, so to speak. Um, Going back to what I was mentioning there earlier about the import of the Hebrew enumeration of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and the Messiah, Meshiach. Um, in the gematria system that I learned and work with through Paul Foster Case, everything is always incorporated into tarot. That's just, of course, there's a lot of applications of gematria, but coming from the Paul Foster Case system, everything always comes back to tarot.
Yes.
So that number there between the serpent in the Garden of Eden and the Messiah of 358 is, it's like, okay, well, 3 is the Empress, which is Venus. 5 is the Hierophant, which is, Taurus. And I always found Taurus being an odd correspondent to what the Hierophant represents, to be honest, but that's my own hang up. So we have the Empress, the Hierophant, and then 8 is Strength, right? Which the Strength card is a direct reference to alchemy and a cyclic sort of infinity of selfhood with objects of desire and with means of expressing force, basically.
Yes.
And it's depicted, of course, in the Arthur Edward Waite deck and most of the classical ones. It's a relationship between Venus and Mars, where it's a certain relationship of no, I see you shaking your head.
Oh, I'm sorry. On the tree of life, no, the path is between Mars and Jupiter, and the card is the woman and the lion. It's Mary Magdalene and the Lion of Judea. It's the lion isn't Mars. The lion is the sun.
Yes.
The woman is
the sign of Leo, which is the house of the sun.
The woman is basically Venus.
Yes. Let's talk about that a bit, Mary Magdalene, sure. Because
I found the picture I was looking for, by the way, when you're ready to go back to that one.
Oh, good. Let's see it.
Okay. Yeah, hold on a sec. Let's just get it up here.
Ah. Okay, hold that for a sec here. So,
all right. Chapter 2, verse 76 of the Book of the Law goes 4, 6, 3, 8, A, B, K, 2, 4, A. That's the top tree. That first group of 10 is the top tree. Has the same value as Libra. Perfect balance, basically. Then it goes L, G, M, O, R, 3, Y, X. That lot adds to 93. That's the trunk of the tree. 93 is the value of time and nature. So you can conceive of the top part as heaven, or that which is beyond time, and this bit as time itself, nature itself, and the bit at the bottom is manifestation. The 10 characters at the bottom have the same value as manifestation.
Let's talk a bit about 93. That is the number that the Thelemites use as a follow-up for all of their greetings. Like in the Paul Foster Case system, it was customary to end all correspondences with fratres and sorors with LVX, which is an encoded reference to light, lux.
The light of the cross, yes.
Exactly. So what is 93? What is that?
Nothing to do with the Thelemic 93. It's Thelema is a Greek word, and in Greek Qaballa, it has the value 93 in Greek. But 93 in English is the value of time and nature and mother and virgin and unity and divide. So it's something paradoxical It's the value of Scorpio, which is the sign and house of death in the zodiac, which I can see you're a little bit overcome. Would you like me to stop?
No, no, thank you for noticing my facial expressions. As you were speaking those words, I was simply running through the correspondences there. Time, of course, I think of, Kronos, Saturn, which is Bina, Bina on the tree of life, which is the primordial feminine.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And
Mother
and
is-
mother,
is
Ima.
93. And Scorpio, which is the sign and house of death, which is the most interesting portion of the zodiac if you're actually practicing magic.
Why do you say that?
Because that's when the change occurs. That's when things stop and start again.
Right after Libra, the balance.
Yeah.
The mystery of birth and re-death is central to a lot of the initiation rituals in all of the occult schools.
Yes. Our system is no different. Our initiation process goes through Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. That whole quadrant of the zodiac.
Why that? Interesting. So just that quadrant there.
Yeah, from the autumn equinox to the winter solstice. Yes.
How does 93 relate to Scorpio?
It's the value of the word.
Ah, the value of the word enumerated in English Qaballa. Okay. Okay.
Libra plus Scorpio has the same value as certainty.
So one question I have about Crowley's system, which I've pondered over many times, is the tarot card for 8 for strength.
Yeah.
And that number 8 appears in all of that stuff we were talking about there, with the number of Jesus Christ in the English, as well as the enumeration in the Hebrew of both, the serpent and the Messiah. So the intelligence of 8 is central in both of those. I'll show the viewers here just an image of the Paul Foster Case strength card. So this is 8. And a Paul Foster Case basically, used most of the images that Arthur Edward Waite did, and yet he slightly modified some of the color schemes and certain symbol sets. It's very similar.
It's a bit more heraldic, isn't it?
Yeah, very Christian, and but his color scheme was brilliant Kabbalistically with the borders and all that. Okay, now here's Crowley's, and as we see, Crowley, this was the most how do I put it, taboo card in his deck, right? So this is his major arcana number 8.
Yes.
And I'll hold that there. And as we see, it's no longer called strength. He changed the name entirely to lust.
Yes.
So regarding Kundalini and the Mars force, so to speak, on the chakra system, which is the sacral, sort of libido, perhaps, which is the red lion in alchemy, and its relationship to Venus and vice versa. In Arthur Edward Waite's and Crowley's decks, we have a soft caressing, so to speak, of the lion, and sort of how do I put it? It's like a subduing and yet channeling effect of that force. Now with Crowley's, we have an all-out embrace of the wild ecstasy of the sexual force. So what do you make of that, Cath? What do you think was going on there?
Crowley and sex magic, do you mean?
Well, just with I guess his interpretation of, well, I guess I guess my question is, what exactly was Crowley's interpretation of the numerological intelligence of 8 in
I,
relation
I,
to how he depicted the card?
I couldn't begin to determine, really. I've absolutely no idea.
Do what do you make of the Babylon symbolism
Oh, crikey.
geometrically?
In English Qaballa, Babylon has the same value as water.
Really?
Mhm.
That
Yes,
would be the hanged man in tarot. Mem, M-E-M, the Hebrew letter mem is water.
it would be in the Hebrew tarot, not in the English tarot.
That's true. That's true. Hmm. Hmm.
Where were we?
I don't know.
Babylon.
I think
Yeah.
we were here. Babylon. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole Babylon thing?
Same value as water.
Same value as water.
Yeah, and there's a gematria method where you reverse the number. So the value of water is 65. So if you reverse 65, you get 56. 56 is the value of cup.
Which is the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the Cup of Babylon is not exactly what Crowley was apparently interested in.
Why do you say that?
Well, the English Kabbalistic idea of the Cup of Babylon is not what Crowley was apparently interested in. The Holy Grail is not the aim of sex magic, after all. It's quite a different trip.
Yeah.
It might get you to the same place in the final analysis. You know, who knows? But it's a different road. Quite a different road. English Qaballa would suggest that Crowley was a bit wrong about Babylon.
How so? I find that refreshing to hear it because I always intuited he might be a little off on some of his proclamations on the whole Whore of Babylon thing, but
Well, he backed off. He appointed Leah, what's her name, as his Scarlet Woman.
it was Cameron, something Cameron,
Not Marjorie Cameron, no,
not
before
Marjorie Cameron.
the first one, Leah Herzik, I think she was called.
Ah,
And she took to it like a duck to water, and she found herself to be within herself. She began to recognize herself
mm-hmm.
as this manifestation of the goddess, and then she kind of asked Crowley to back up his assertions on various points. I asked him to provide the evidence, you know.
Ah,
And they had various arguments and divisions and so forth and so on, and he ended up stripping her of the title Scarlet Woman, which you can't do. It's not a title to be handed out like a blooming, you have passed this exam, now you may have this certificate. Oh
uh-huh.
dear, you cheated on the exam, we are revoking your certificate now, and you no longer, you know.
How did she handle that admonishment from Crowley or that falling out?
I think she was deeply upset over it, but she eventually found her own life away from Crowley, and Crowley found himself another Scarlet Woman, and story rolled on. Yeah. But I think she felt very, very badly betrayed. But it's not my area. You know, I'm not terribly interested in Crowleyanity and Thelema and all these historical, quasi-political machinations. It's not something that I'm interested in. My internet connection is unstable, it says.
I just saw that. I think you're back now. For a second there, it was frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I think of the number 93, of course, running tarot cards through the numbers, the 9 is of course the Hermit, and the 3 is the Magician, or I'm sorry, the Empress. So right there, the agency of the 3 of creativity, of that gestational birthing feminine quality acting upon the quality of the Hermit, which is the attainment of wisdom, the completion of a cycle, the old wise man who's attained the mountain holding a lantern to everyone down below. If you add the numbers together, of course, you end up with 12, which is the Hanged Man, Mem, water, and 1 plus 2 brings us right back down to the Empress. So this feminine quality undergirthing the number 93, it seems to be all over the place, both in Kabbalah and in tarot.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about the divine feminine in relation to where society is at now, and where religious trends and occult trends might be going? A lot of people talk about the divine feminine. And even, some of the political feminists get a bit militant to where they're more masculine than men in their push for femininity, which gets confusing. But how do you feel about the divine feminine in your assessment, and what you would like to see a bit more expressed in occult work, maybe, and in the world?
It's a question of having a different philosophy, a different attitude, a different point of view. My creation myth isn't, and God said, let there be light, and got it all done in 7 days. However you interpret 7 days, there are lots of sevens around. My creation myth starts with nothing, which is essentially a negative state, which you can describe as feminine, if you want to. And this negativity divides into nothing and less than nothing. Nothing can't make more than itself. It can only make less than nothing. So you have 2 negativities. So what happens when you divide and then multiply negative by negative? You get positive. And this is in the Book of the Law. The Book of the Law says, let men not speak of thee as one, but as none, for thou art, and let them not speak of thee at all, for thou art continuous. And then it carries on. None breathe the light, faint and fairy of the stars. And 2, for I am divided for love's sake, for the chance of union. This is the creation of the world, that the pain of division is as nothing, and the joy of dissolution all. That's the creation myth that I ascribe to. That's the spiritual philosophy of creation that I consider to be most satisfactory. I don't think, Jim used to say, you can only describe creation in poetic terms. You can't get any nearer to creation than by poetry or with poetry. You know, and that's how I view creation, and that's how I go along.
That's beautiful.
I think it's an alteration or a change in the baseline philosophy is what's needed. And I think the feminists don't have a solid foundation. You as a Kabbalist should get what I mean there.
The relationship to time and embodiment and first matter, prima materia, is really what we're talking about with the feminine, I think.
And it functions within English Qaballa quite nicely as division of nothing. On the complete tree diagram I was showing you earlier, that in the center of the trunk there's a 0.
Mm-hmm.
And on either side of it is a 1, and on either side of the 1 is a 2. In the numerical values. So it is illustrating this right from the very center of the symbol. So it's not a creation that comes down from above, and it's not a creation that bubbles up from underneath. It's a creation that happens from the middle, all at once, all the time.
Yeah. And that right there is oddly, and it's funny, when I was listening to you talk about that, for some reason I'm thinking about quantum physicists, right? Looking for the God particle, and I'm thinking about neuropsychologists trying to figure out what consciousness is and where it derives from in our biology. And I'm thinking about, that the roboticists who are looking to create artificial intelligence, and yet they're all three of those fields of physics, neurology, and artificial intelligence, they're all reaching this sort of barrier point of an unknown, trying to grasp at the core of what existence is and what consciousness is. And
here's one for you.
Yeah.
Here's a nice. Consciousness has the same value as the Big Bang.
Really? In English Qaballa, consciousness and the Big Bang have the same value?
Mm-hmm.
Know thyself.
Yeah.
Infinitely interrelationally know thyself, grand universe.
Yeah. Well, you can with English Qaballa if you're somebody who speaks and thinks and dreams in English.
Well, Cath,
and you've got modern words like particle and quantum floating about. What can you do with words like that? How can you integrate these ideas into your whole magical ethos, if not by way of English Qaballa?
that's a good question.
Which is what you can do by way of English Qaballa.
How can you integrate them? And regarding the old systems of Hebrew and Hermetic and the old languages, so to speak, I always felt this resistance to accepting that the mystical and the divinely inspired were somehow in the past, that it was somehow this separate system, akin to okay, we have our normal language we use and think in and communicate with every single day. Oh, but that's not magical. That doesn't carry the intelligence of the divine. It's these older systems that have that. Doesn't that seem like obvious rubbish? Because the singularityness of being and becoming within all creation, with all intelligence, within all life in the cosmos, it's always riding on a divinity of its own becoming and exploring itself in a system.
Yes. And if I haven't managed to convince you in this discussion so far of the veracity of English Qaballa and the fact that it is a new Qaballa for a new age, and this is a new age, And the gods are very much, yeah, still alive and functioning, and so is the goddess. And watch out, because this is just the beginning.
Oh,
Hang on, it's going to be
yeah.
a bumpy ride, you know.
Times of upheaval. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, I am absolutely serious.
Oh, Kath, you are such a delight and pleasure. We should probably wrap up here. We've been going about 2 hours now.
Okay.
Is there anything you'd like to toss in there in closing or summation?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll only start rambling off on some other nice little piece of EQ proof.
Well, perhaps we can do that again in the future. The door is always open.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, I will put links to your published works in the comment notes. And do you have a blog or any kind of website you can direct people to?
No, I'm on
No.
Facebook, that's all.
Okay. All right, Kath. Well, you be well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for your work. I'm gonna pick through this still, and I'm gonna ponder these things because I can tell this was a labor of love of you doing this. And I'm gonna experiment with this and work with it, and I'll let you know what I find.
Sure, yeah, go ahead. Good luck.
All right.
Don't
Thank
blame me.
Thank you for being you, Kath. You have a great day, and thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining us.
Eric. See you later.